Hey everyone, thanks for tuning in to episode 12 of the Dine Sports YouTube page and podcast network. Got a great guest for you today. We'll be joined by A.Bailey of A.Bailey Photos, who is the photographer for the Algonquin men's and women's varsity teams. So she shoots a variety of sports at the collegiate level there and has a lot of experience now building her portfolio in the sports photography field. So she's going to sit down with us and share everything as far as how she first got started to some of the equipment she uses now, tips and tricks to getting, lighting right, the editing process, and everything else that goes into getting that perfect shot or that perfect moment. If you haven't already, just a friendly reminder down at the bottom of your screen there's a subscribe button. Make sure you guys hit that so that you guys can stay up to date with all the content that we're bringing you. We've got some really great guests coming up in the next week, and we've also got some special content with some of the sports leagues starting to start up again. So we'll do some deep dives into some of those sports and those fields as well there too. So we'll get right into it here. A.Bailey. Hey guys, thanks for joining us for another episode of the Dine Sports YouTube page and podcast network. Joining me today is A.Bailey of A.Bailey Photos. Abbie, how are you today?
Good. How are you, Kyle?
I'm doing great. Thanks so much for joining us. How is the family doing over there? You guys staying safe and healthy?
Yeah, we're doing good. It's been pretty crazy, but every day is different. So we just try to take it one day at a time, try to stay inside as much as possible. If we have to go grocery shopping, make sure we're layered with gloves and masks and any type of other gear that'll keep us safe.
Yeah, definitely in strange times, and hopefully we're coming towards the end of it there as restrictions start getting lifted. But enough about COVID. I think people have heard enough about
Enough
that
about
on the news
COVID.
for a while there.
Yeah.
Let's talk a little bit about your journey and specifically your sports photography. So first and foremost, how did you ever even get involved in photography in the first place?
I first started when I believe I was in grade 12, and I had a friend. His name is Ben Telford. It's at Ben Telford Visuals on Instagram if you guys want to check him out. We started together doing rugby photos initially. So I first got the camera and I was like, oh, well, we can play around with this, see what happens, see where it goes. And once I reviewed the first set of pictures I did, I was like, wow, I actually have a talent in this. I could probably pursue this and just keep it as a hobby. And once I started college, and I now work for Thunder Athletics as a photographer now. So they posted on their Instagram page that they needed photographers for the upcoming season. So I put my resume out there and brought some sample photos as they asked me to do, and they loved it. They loved the grade 12 boys rugby photos. They loved that. I got huddle shots, action shots, shots of the coaches just and the crowd interacting as well. So they really loved that. I didn't focus mainly on the players themselves, but actually the people that were involved in the games as well, like refs, family, friends, coaches, all the things like that. So once that I showed them that, they got me working soccer, basketball, rugby for Algonquin, volleyball. And once I started getting into the hang of things, that's when I really was like, okay, wow, I actually have a talent in this. I can pursue this.
Wow. And good for you. Shouting out your good friend Ben Telford there as well
Yeah.
too. Being a good friend, I love it. So I mean, other than Ben, when you were a grade 12 sort of student there, did you have any, either supporters or mentors that were sort of helping you nurture that love for photography, whether it was, a teacher or a
Yeah.
relative or whatever?
So a lot of my family members were really supportive as well. They saw my artistic eye when they looked back and saw some of the pictures that I did, but also within my church as well. Um, Once they heard that I started like having a photography career, so to speak, they really wanted me to get like more practice, get involved in taking like church shots like of the services and stuff like that. So I believe that the church people themselves actually helped me a lot as well.
Right on, right on. And so, I mean, you've already kind of touched on it here. You're doing soccer with Algonquin, you're doing
Right,
rugby, basketball, all sorts of sports there.
right.
Is there any one sport that's maybe harder than the others to try and capture the action shots?
There is definitely when I first started, soccer was the sport that kind of got me a little tricky. It was really very hard because walking onto the field and seeing how big the field was and how much space there was between players and running different drills during the games. A lot of the spacing had to do with me properly getting action shots, and a lot of the angles kind of it wasn't a bit focused as much. Some were in focus, some weren't. um the players kept moving quickly, especially with the boys. The girls, I had a little more handle on things because you would be able to target them easier, but the guys, it's quick. So I had a tough time like making sure that, okay, all the pictures have to be in focus here. And I also had in mind that my boss is going to post them to like the different media outlets. So I was like, okay, I need to focus on them as much as possible so that you can tell a story with what I'm taking.
Yeah, yeah. So the sports, I guess, then that actually cover a larger field rather than basketball where it's just small.
Right,
Or those are
right,
the trickier ones to shoot. Then.
right. Yeah, and I believe volleyball too was a bit trickier because it was my first time ever shooting volleyball. Because at the time when I started in high school, the volleyball season was over, so I didn't really get a chance to see how I liked it. So with the volleyball now, again, the boys were much harder to shoot because their like ability to jump higher, serve harder, like they move kind of faster. But not that the girls don't do that, but I feel like with the guys it was just more of a challenge, just because, and especially where you're allowed to move around on the court, because they have a specific area that photographers and staff members and can move around, and it's really difficult at times. Yeah.
Yeah, yeah. So yeah, as you say, you usually have your sort of designated spots there. But have
Right,
you had over the years a few close encounters where you're trying to get
right.
shots and the ball's coming right for you? Or
Yeah,
yeah,
I've had a lot of incidents, especially I believe basketball. I've gotten the ball thrown in my direction, almost hitting me, trying to get, even though I am where I'm supposed to be, but there has been times where like the balls can just fly over to one side and you're trying to duck and take the pictures at the same time. So it's a lot. Yeah.
yeah, yeah. You ever have the Shaquille O'Neal diving into the stands?
Yeah.
Anyone
Yeah,
land on your lap or
exactly.
anything like that? Or?
Yeah. Yeah. And it's those moments that you try to get on camera the most too, because it's a nice scenery to watch.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. It makes for an interesting shot for sure.
It does, yes.
So, I mean, I'm sure it's changed quite a bit, even from when you first started to the equipment
Right.
you're using now. But when you first started, in grade 12, shooting
Hmm.
the grade 12 rugby and all of that, there, were you using just sort of, a hand-me-down camera? Or did you borrow one from the school? Were you using like a
Right.
disposable one? Like, how did you sort of get your hands on that to start?
So when I started, my dad had like a little hand-me-down camera that I would take shots in the house or outside walking, and then I upgraded to a Canon T6. So a lot of the features on both cameras are different, of course, because one is more upgraded than the other. And I started shooting with a 15 to 55 millimeter lens, I believe. And obviously with that length it can't do too much, but it does enough. So then over the years I started looking into different lenses and seeing how can I improve on, especially for sports photography, how could I improve with the focusing of the subjects, especially with the different sports that are out there. So I made sure to do some research before I invested like money, because it is expensive to invest a lot of money into certain products that you would need to use. But I ended up getting another sports type of lens. So that's the one I use right now for Thunder. So I feel like there's a huge difference, especially with the length and how far you can get. So I'm really happy about that one.
Yeah, for sure. And, you hit on something right there too, is, I think a lot of people would love to sort of get into photography, but it's
Right.
not cheap, right?
Right, exactly. Right.
So you know, for someone who is brand new to photography, and let's stick with sports here, and they're thinking
Hmm.
about maybe getting into sports photography, what's maybe one or two features or something that they might not know to look for that you would really recommend that they look for in a camera?
I would say, before even going out and buying a camera, just taking some time, and researching the different types of brands of cameras, because there when I first started, I didn't know that there were so many brands of cameras out there until I actually went and looked on Google and YouTube and looking at the different tutorials. So I would say that's a big thing, because if you want to invest in something as big as a camera, you would want to make sure that, like, nothing bad happens with it, or no discrepancies or stuff like that. So you want to make sure, like, it will last you a long time, because buying rebuying cameras, it gets really expensive.
Yeah, yeah, for sure, for sure. So let's talk a little bit about your process here, because
Hmm.
for those listening at home, they might not have any idea as far as, you know, how the action on the field actually gets onto, you know, social media
Right.
or the front page of the newspaper or whatever, right? So when you're covering an event, are you just taking hundreds and hundreds of photos, or are you trying to capture specific moments? So how do
Right.
you approach an event?
So I do a little bit of both. um as far as the games itself, I make sure to take multiple pictures at a time, because they always say that it's never good to just take one picture, because it might not turn out to be good. So what I do is I just have it on continuous shooting. um because when I go back to look over them, I could say, oh, I'm glad I actually took that picture, because it looks good, even though there may be 30 more that looks just like it. I'll have those options to say, okay, well, I can present this one, or I can present this one as my normal finding. As far as like staff and the the viewers of the game, or just people that are just there to work the game, I try to incorporate them as well, because they are a part of the event. It's not just like the players and the athletes or the coaches. It's really a team effort. So I try to capture a lot of that as well.
Yeah, yeah, and so you're trying to sort of paint the picture of the atmosphere, you know, the fans,
Right.
the refs, the everything there, which is kind of unique too, right? You don't see a
Hmm.
lot of that sort of thing portrayed in social media or print media
Right.
like that. It's the focus is usually on the players. Why is
Yeah.
it so important for you to sort of capture the action around the game as well too?
I feel like it's really important, because it's not, like you said, it's not looked at as much as the athletes itself. And the people who are watching in the bleachers, they play an important role just as much as the athletes do. They cheer on the athletes, they motivate them to be better athletes and stuff like that. So I think it's really important to showcase that, even though sometimes it may not get presented as much, like you said, in the newspaper or on social media outlets. But it's good to know that, okay, they're not just taking of the athletes itself, they're actually taking of the people watching, or the staff members that are working the game, or the referees, or all the coaches. So I think that's very important.
Yeah, yeah. And so when you do sort of wrap up an event and you're starting to go through all your shots there,
Hmm.
are there any particular programs or software that you use?
I what I do is, to be honest, using different programs, I it gets really complicated at times, because just figuring out, like, certain little details when it comes to programming and stuff like that. So me personally, I don't use a lot of programs, just because I want to keep the pictures as natural as possible. Like, I know editing takes a lot of time, it really does. And I've spoken to people, like other photographers, that take me through how their editing looks like and how long it takes them. So what I try to do is keep the picture as original as it comes out, and just do a little tweaking here and there. But other than that, yeah, I try to keep a lot of the pictures, like, as clean as possible and as natural as possible.
Right on, right on. And you know, again, you know, in the age of Photoshop here, that's not exactly
Right,
common,
exactly.
right? Yeah.
Yeah.
So for again, for those that might not be super familiar with photography and or might be considering getting into it, is there one particular tool that you really recommend that they get themselves familiar with, whether it is Photoshop or
Hmm.
one of those other programs there for when they do need to make the edits?
Right. Um, there's a program called Adobe. I'm not sure if there's another extension to that name, but or Lightroom. Actually, that's the name of it. Adobe Lightroom is what I started to use and kind of familiarize myself. So that could be an interesting tool to use. Also, depending on, I use my MacBook Pro to do my like transferring my pictures and looking at them. There's an app on my phone that you're able to connect with my camera. I don't know if other cameras have this, but connect my phone to my camera to view the pictures instantly so that I see like what I'm working with or what shots I've taken already. But depending on the type of device you use to go through your pictures and see which ones you want to delete, which ones you want to keep, getting software or getting like attachments that you can use to connect your camera also with your phone type thing, that's really helpful as well. um at first when I was struggling to figure out what can I use to actually view my pictures and have the same software like JPEG or PDF or however you view your photos, you want to make sure that you have you're open to having that type of software.
Yeah, yeah, right on. So, I mean, you started your journey at the high school level, and
Hmm.
high school athletics are fast enough there, but there's clearly a jump
A
in.
different level, yes,
Yeah,
yeah,
yeah. When you go
absolutely,
from high
yeah.
school to college, there, what was the biggest sort of adjustment you needed to make in taking your photos, going from high school to college
Right.
that
I
fast?
think the thing for me is that um high school sports, in terms of over general speaking, high school sports and then college university level sports is totally two completely different things. A lot of people think that it's somewhat the same, but the intensity and the drive of those levels of sports is a lot different. So as you could imagine, taking pictures for college and university level sports is just as intense and just as driving as you can imagine.
Yeah, yeah, and I'm sure you've probably been able to get some, pretty cool experiences there
Right.
at college level. Do any
Yeah.
of them stick out? Maybe one or two really special things that you remember more than others?
I believe there has been a couple games where like there's a lot of things that stood out to me, not so much on the photography side, but so much on the games itself. But as far as photography goes, there a lot of the athletes always come to me and say, "Wow, you take such amazing pictures. I love that you take pictures." And I think the main thing for me was that I started photography as a hobby to see like what else I could do. And I've always had the artistic view and the artistic eye in this case. So I always did it for the love of the art and telling a story somewhat, whether it's sports or whether it's dance or singing or whatever it may be. So I made sure to always have fun with what I'm doing, but at the same time showcase my talent through photography. So I've never viewed photography for me as a job. I viewed it as like another thing that I do for fun. And surprisingly, people like it, and I do it that because people like it as much as I like it as much. But I I don't see it as a job for me. I just see it as a next hobby.
Nice, nice. And so, you already sort of mentioned it there.
Hmm.
Have you had, athletes coming up to you, whether it's before a game, and okay, make sure
Right.
I want some photos of
I've
myself, or
yeah, I've had even in high school, I've had that in high school and I've had that in college as well. It does get You do get a lot of pressure when that happens just because okay, we got to make sure that they're all good so they all like them. So there's a next level of pressure, so to speak. Um but at the end when they do receive their pictures, they're happy with it and they're satisfied with it. So that's all I'm asking for.
yeah, yeah, yeah. You ever been just scrolling through social media and be like, hey, I took that photo?
Yeah, I have, and it makes me happy knowing that they love it as much as I do, just because, well, it's them doing the sports that they love, but also they get a picture behind it. So I'm really happy about that.
Nice, nice. So, I mean, let's even expand it a little bit beyond sports
Hmm.
here, right? What other things, other than people on a court or a field or whatever, do you
Right.
actually enjoy going out and taking pictures of and get capturing moments?
Um, I believe like big crowd events, kind of like, for example, Canada Day, or um different marches. Like, for example, the march that we had, I have a photographer friend that was there that was taking pictures as well, and I've seen her thread of pictures on Instagram, and they look really nice. So I feel like not only sports is what people should focus on, but they can focus on like different areas, like their families or self portraits or different events like weddings or recitals, stuff like that, that they should focus on, so they can get a broader scope of what their talent can actually get them.
Yeah, yeah, and obviously there's, as you say, lots of different sort of avenues for photography, right?
Hmm.
Some people
Right,
work exclusively on landscapes, some people work exclusively on buildings, some people
right.
are just black and white photos. Do you have a personal favorite that you like using, or do you just sort of like using them all depending on how the mood strikes you?
Yeah, like you said, like you said, it all depends on how I'm feeling on that day. Sometimes I will just go out and walk and just see different scenery and take pictures of that, even though it's not as fancy. But just going out and walking and just, or even like flowers or different types of trees, nature, just people walking on the street, landmarks, anything really. It all depends on the mood that I'm in.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. So, I mean, you've probably taken tens of thousands of photos over the years
Hmm.
here now. So, I don't know how easy this question will be, but does one photo that you've taken over all the years sort of stand out above the rest, or do you have, maybe two or three favorites that you've maybe framed around the house or anything like that?
Yeah, so I honestly can say, there's during the school year for Thunder, there's these photos for photo of the week that are chosen to be put out for the week. I would have to say the ones that I was picked for are my favorite ones, but like you said, I took thousands of photos. So at this point now, it's hard to have one favorite, because there's a lot of pictures that you can take that you love them all, or you just love two or three. But I believe that the photo of the week pictures is the ones that I like a lot.
Yeah, yeah, and you touched on something important there too, right? Like you could
Hmm.
spend a whole day in a gym and take hundreds
Right,
and hundreds of photos, and then you go and you sort of look through them and you go, I don't really like any of these, right?
right.
So, do you have any advice on, for those who are just sort of starting out in
Mhm.
sports photography there, how to overcome that, and maybe being too self-critical of, I need
Right.
the perfect shot, perfectionism, all of that there, is that something you struggled with at all when you first started?
I did struggle with that. Perfection for me, like, I it's really difficult, especially in photography, to be a perfectionist, so to speak. I do want to say that what you can train yourself to do is just take thousands of pictures. Just keep taking thousands of pictures, especially for sports in this case. But for anything else that you're taking, just constantly take them, because then you can go back on the next day and look through them and see, okay, there's some that I really do like, and there's some that are not so great. I feel like that'll help a lot with people's confidence that are just starting out, or that's been taking photos for a while. That'll help them a lot, because then they'll realize, okay, well, even though they're not all great, there are some that comes out nice, and I can present this as what I did.
Yeah. Yeah. And is there maybe one or two sort of factors that, people don't instantly think of that play a huge role in the outcome of a photo there that people should actually pay more attention to, like, lighting or,
Hmm.
the movement of the crowds, or did you learn any sort of tough lessons in your first
Yeah,
couple of years there when you started?
I learned that lighting and focus plays huge roles in how the photos come out.
Mhm.
And I didn't realize that until I started working for Thunder, because I would look back on pictures and be like, okay, this is not like I'm used to seeing from doing high school photos. So lighting definitely plays a key role in that, and having the pictures in focus. um, a lot of people tend to pay attention to how focused they are in that specific picture. So I try to make sure that that's how I'm getting all the photos, all of them in focus. Because if you like a lot of the NBA shots as well, they're drop dead focused, and you can tell who the person is. The lighting is right. The subject is clear. So I think that's what people look out for: how clear the subjects are and how the lighting kind of goes with that.
Yeah, yeah. So in that same sort of thread there, does it become easier or harder to shoot outdoors then? Is natural light
Right,
easier to work with, or is the, fluorescent tube lights
right.
above distracting?
Me personally, I think outdoor lighting is more easier to work with than indoor lighting, just because outdoor lighting, especially on a sunny day like today, for example, you don't have to adjust much with the lighting on the functions on your camera, versus indoor. You got to do a lot of tweaks here and there. You got to focus. You got to adjust the lighting settings and stuff like that. So I feel like once you get a lot of practice and with shooting events, not even events, you could probably just go outside or go indoors and practice a lot as well. Practice, 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 because you'll end up feeling more confident in how you take pictures, and you'll end up, saying, okay, it's getting easier for me. At the beginning, it was hard. I will say, as you can imagine, it was hard for me to start at first because I didn't know much. I didn't know anything. Um, so once I started, doing my little research here and there, practicing at certain games or practicing at certain events, it got me in the hang of things.
Yeah, yeah. And now that you are sort of, in the swing of things there, are there any particular photographers or, Instagram accounts or social media or whatever that you follow because you love the quality of work that they're putting out, or
Hmm.
any photographers that sort of inspire you?
Right. So I'd say like the one person that like inspired me is Ben. He's not just only a photographer, he's a videographer as well. So he does a lot of music videos, he does a lot of documentaries. But what I love about his work is the content of his work, and how he really one-on-one gets to know the artist he's working with, and how he can figure out best to tell their story and what they're trying to come up with and their creativity. But just like how his content ends up looking at the end, it's just really nice.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. So, if you could give one sort of piece of advice to someone who is just picking up a camera for the first time
Hmm.
and wants to get involved in sports photography, what would it be?
I would say to be yourself. I know that sounds cliche and everyone says it, but just be yourself. The key to photography really is your own creativity when you're taking photos. When it comes to working with people, that's a different side of it. But you personally, you have to just love what you're doing and be creative on your own, because then you won't be as hard on yourself when it doesn't turn out, like the pictures don't turn out for some reason. So when you're portraying yourself in a more creative light, then you won't be so hard on yourself to say, oh well, I give up, this is too hard. But you can actually learn a lot of new things that can help you.
Yeah, yeah. And so, looking ahead to the future here, what do you have in store for yourself? Are you going to continue working with Thunder, or are you going to
Yeah.
focus on one particular sport, or just keep
Hmm.
on trucking?
I as long as I am in college, I will continue with Thunder. If I don't know what the future holds, things might change, but
Mhm.
I'm hoping to incorporate photography with my job, like my future job, to becoming a paralegal in some way, shape, or form. I just want to keep having it a part of my life because it's made a lot of things happen for me. It's made a lot of positive feedback and learnings come from it. So I really wouldn't want to lose that. As far as the sports, I do want to continue doing different types of sports and not specifically just one sport, just because like there are different sports out there and it'll help me practice and get better as the years go by. So I just want to keep doing with that.
Right on, good for you. And so, where can people find you and learn more about your artwork and the stuff that you're putting out there?
It would be the Instagram account, the A.Bailey Photos is where I would post like certain pictures from the season or overall or just overall. And then I'm working on trying to start a website going and seeing how well with that. I still have to do some research, but I'm hoping for that as well. So, but for right now, it's just that Instagram account.
Amazing, amazing. Well, yeah, for those that are watching, make sure you guys go and check that out. She's put out quite a bit of good content there, and you're doing
Mhm.
phenomenal work. So, thank you so much for
Thank
joining
you.
us today, Abby.
Thank you so much. Thank you for having me.
Anytime, anytime. You guys stay safe out there. Take care.
Bye, guys.
And that's a wrap for another episode of the Dine Sports YouTube page and podcast network. Thanks for joining us this week. Huge shout out goes to Abbie Bailey for sitting down and sharing her sports photography journey with us, and tips and tricks on not only how she's gotten to where she is now, but also how she got started as well too. So some definite tangible stuff for those that are listening who might have an interest in sports photography or photography in general as to how you can get started. If you haven't already, make sure you like, comment, share, subscribe. We've also got various platforms on social media that we'd love to connect with you guys as well there too. So be sure to give them a follow and check them out for some additional content. Thanks very much. Have a great night.